Interpol has issued a red notice for eco-terrorist Paul Watson.
Anyone who know of his whereabouts, contact authorities.
I feel that it's our moral obligation to prevent criminals from raping and plundering that this planet has for all of us.
But I can't back down. This is too important. If the ocean dies, we all die.
Man, oh man. I am still have chills, kind of.
I really just want to hang out with him.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
My name is Mauro.
And I'm Dan.
And
This is
this is
Cool Animal
People. And we are kind of speechless.
Yeah.
About 4 minutes ago, we finished the call with Captain Paul Watson.
Probably one of our coolest. Again,
Yeah, no
all
offense
of our
to-
other guests, we love you, and you're all incredible in your own right. But take a look at this man's resume. So he was.
Let's talk about the professional resume first, because like just his career.
Yeah.
What he's
So
yeah.
co-founding member of Greenpeace.
Mm-hmm.
Left that to go start Sea Shepherd.
Mm-hmm. Which is the subject of the Discovery Channel reality TV show Whale
Are they
Wars.
sponsoring this podcast? You keep mentioning Discovery Channel.
Sign up to Discovery Plus. Use code Dan10 to get 0% off.
It's not going to work.
Anyways,
13 books.
13 books. 14, I think, is one's like a two-parter.
Okay.
The subject of the documentary Watson, that you can rent on Amazon Prime, YouTube, wherever you get your movies. Producer of Seaspiracy, The Cove. That's his professional resume.
This guy is a fucking legend.
On the field, being dragged with a bunch of bloody seal pelts by some Russians, some horrible Russians, being dunked into Arctic waters, getting hypothermia for 4 days, recovering, and then just going back into the ship and doing the same thing over and over again, blocking a whaling and sealing ship.
On foot,
on the ice. Why not? Just stop them from doing what they're doing.
I've spoken to a lot of people who are very committed to what they do and are very passionate about their work. I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who is this dedicated.
And determined.
I think it takes a special kind of mind and level of commitment to do the work that he does and his organization does. And man,
he's been literally doing it all of his life.
Yeah, since he was 18.
Since he was 10.
Oh, well, his first interaction. He has 10.
Yeah, his first disruptive sort of anti-poaching was at 10 years old, and you'll hear about it in the talk. Sea Shepherd is not a protesting group. They are an anti-poaching organization. They are a direct action organization. Yeah. There's no such thing as putting a sign up and saying, hey, don't kill whales. They go in there.
And they stop you from killing whales.
They stop you, literally stop you and prevent you and destroy equipment used in the killing of whales,
they will sink
seals.
Fleets.
They have no problem scuttling, which is the sinking of a ship.
That's the word?
Scuttling is the sinking of a ship, which is what they did in Iceland.
Norway. They sunk half their fleet.
They've done so much amazing work.
He's been called an eco-terrorist.
Ecoterrorist, which he gave us the rebuttal for that during the conversation, which was great. Check out seashepherd.org. Donate. Sign up for their newsletter.
Go follow them.
Yeah, they have all their socials up.
Here's all their socials.
Volunteer. Get educated. But most importantly, listen to this amazing human being.
I'm emotionally drained from this. I'm so tired from this conversation.
It's a very interesting
I was so intensely listening to his stories. And
he is a fantastic storyteller. He is an amazing human being doing amazing work. And we thank him.
Also, I didn't mention this on the podcast. Paul's got a fucking fantastic head of hair.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Majestic.
And a great beard, too.
Paul, the whole thing. Love it.
Great character. Just listen to. Don't even you can skip over what we say.
Yeah, skip me and Mauro. We're nonsense.
At this point, just listen to what Captain Paul has to say because it's very important and needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So without further ado, Captain Paul Watson. All right, we are here with the legendary Captain Paul Watson. Captain Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we're big fans, and we know about what you do. Can you tell our listeners and those watching a little bit about who you are and all the amazing things that you do?
Well, I founded the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society in 1977 because I felt there was a need for a group to intervene against illegal activities. We're basically an anti-poaching organization that has now evolved into a global movement. So we have 11 ships out on the ocean, and at any given time about 250 volunteers from 25 different countries who are working on those vessels to intervene against illegal activities. And just last week, for instance, we arrested 6 poaching vessels off in the waters of Sierra Leone.
Wow.
So this is an international operation, and just to not get it confused with other organizations, you're not a protesting group. You're an anti-poaching organization.
Yes, we're not. We don't protest. We intervene. And over the last few years, we've evolved to where we're now working in partnership with various governments of the world, numerous African nations, Latin American nations. And what that means is that we provide the ships and the volunteers, and they provide the authority and the enforcement. So we go after them with military from those various countries on board. We have some Mexican naval personnel on our vessels in the Sea of Cortez, and we have military people from Sierra Leone, Liberia, Gabon, Ghana, São Tomé, Tanzania, and be on board the vessels at any given time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so. All right, first I want to get to where did this all come from? Obviously, we all have so like I started I have a dog walking company, so I've been an animal person my whole life. But we all have those moments in our lives where we kind of are like, this is it for me. I want to work with animals, or I want to be doing something in this world. What was that for you? Like, where did it all kind of start?
Well, it began for me when I was 10 years old. I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers where I lived in eastern Canada. And, I had a wonderful time. And the next summer, when I was 11, I went back to see where the beavers were and found out they were all gone. That trappers had taken them all during the winter. And that made me very angry. So that winter, I began to walk the trap lines and free the animals and destroy the traps. And I guess I've been doing the same thing for the last half a century. But when I was 18, I was the youngest founding member of the Greenpeace Foundation, and I was with Greenpeace and was served as first officer because I had the experience. I was with the Norwegian, Swedish Merchant Marine, and also I had gone to university to study communications. So I was with Greenpeace until '77, but I got very frustrated with their protesting approach, which I think is very submissive, which is like, please don't kill the whales, and then they just hang banners and take pictures, and the whales die, and I didn't like to continue doing that. So I set Sea Shepherd up as an alternative to intervene and not to protest.
I feel like that's the way to go in this line of anti-poaching and sea conservation. If you put a banner up saying, "Hey, don't kill the whales," the people that are killing the whales.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll stop killing the whales because you put your sign up. Like they're not going to listen to you.
I don't think the banner or the protesting is very efficient. I saw in the Watson documentary that just came out from Discovery Channel last year, you had a moment with a sealing vessel, along with your partner, Bob, I think.
You mean a whaling vessel?
Oh, the whaling vessel. Sorry, that was the whaling vessel. Yeah, and you stood in front of it while it was breaking the ice.
Oh, no, that was the sealing
vessel. Oh, that was the
sorry.
sealing
Okay.
vessel.
Right,
I was
so
right.
got it.
Yeah, and I feel like, you were directly intervening and preventing that vessel to get to the place to club seals. And that's sort of...
Both those actions were with Bob Hunter, so that's why I was confused with them.
Right. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, how 2 men in the middle of the ice were able to stop a sealing vessel and what transpired afterwards?
Well, it was a Norwegian sealing vessel. It was about 200 miles off the coast of Labrador. And, we couldn't think of anything else to stop them, so we just stood directly in the path of it and blocked them. And, there were seals in front of us, baby seals, and to prevent them from being run down. And the captain did take a run at us, and the ice was cracking under our feet. And I guess he felt that we were just going to step aside. And when we didn't, one of the sealers on the ice yelled up that we weren't moving, and then he stopped. So we were able to then move the seals from the path of the vessel.
It takes some cojones doing the work that you were doing, man. I like, honestly, the thing for me is, when you see, people poaching, people harvesting just massive quantities of fish from the ocean, it's frustrating because you're like, shit, I wish I could just like fucking stop this.
Yeah.
You did it.
I wouldn't use the word harvest. You harvest oranges. You don't harvest living things.
Right.
Well, that's what I mean. But it feels like they're like just pulling just tranches and tranches of fish out of the sea, and it's just like it's frustrating to watch.
They're strip mining the ocean of life is what they're doing.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's overexploitation. There are no sustainable commercial fisheries anywhere in the world today. And, the fishing industry would like you to think that, the fish you get in a restaurant or on the stores comes from, a small group of men and women are out there bravely catching fish with hook and line and pulling them in small boats. But the reality is super tankers and gigantic drag trawl nets that could literally pull in 3 school buses full of fish, 100-mile-long long lines, 100-mile-long drift nets, gigantic gill nets. This is the reality of mechanized, corporate, industrialized fishing, and that is what is destroying the ocean. Now, the fishing industry, they also are trying to put across this thing, well, you're putting poor fishermen out of work and taking away their livelihood. No, what's taking away the livelihood of those poor artisanal indigenous fishermen are the corporate industrialized fishing operations. The reason you have pirates in Somalia and now emerging piracy in the Gulf of Guinea is because these are impoverished fishermen who have been put into that situation because of the real pirates, the Asian and European fishing fleets, which has plundered their waters. And they're doing this on a global basis. And so it's the European and Asian fishing fleets which are literally taking life from every corner of this planet. And it's all short-term investment for short-term gain to make as much money as they possibly can in the shortest period of time. There simply is no sustainable fishery, and it is collapsing. Fishery after fishery is collapsing. The northern cod fishery has collapsed. The orange ruppy fishery has collapsed. The anchovy population has collapsed. And, there's only one way this can go, is the death of the ocean. And as I say all the time, the ocean dies, well, we die too. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen that we breathe. That produces that, and it also sequesters an enormous amount of CO2. So really, that's a recipe for disaster. You remove phytoplankton from the sea, we all die. We simply do not live on this planet without phytoplankton.
And then it's frustrating just watching this. Like,
it goes so much further than saving the whales, which in and of itself is a huge task and hugely beneficial to the world, not just the whale population. You've also mentioned, which is the stat that just completely blew my mind, that a single blue whale can produce 3 tons of excrement that the phytoplankton feed on in order to produce that oxygen. You take away the whale, phytoplankton dies. Like it's sort of like a domino effect, and then the phytoplankton dies, we die.
Well, the whales are the farmers of the ocean, really. It's this thing called the whale pump. They feed deep down, and they bring those nutrients to the surface and distribute them on the surface in whale feces, which float. And that provides the nitrogen and the iron, which are the nutrients that are needed by phytoplankton. It's not just whales, of course. It's all marine mammals. It's seabirds. It's fish. It's all, but it's absolutely necessary to have that fecal material provide those nutrients to phytoplankton. And then, of course, phytoplankton feeds the krill or the zooplankton. The zooplankton feeds the fish and goes all right up off the top. So you start interfering with this interdependence within this cycle, then you're going to cause a lot of problems.
It's like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
When obviously you started before we were even on this earth, what positives have you at least seen happen from your work and the work of other people like yourself in at least hopefully changing some hearts and minds? I mean, like, I'll be honest, like, I really look up to you, and what you do like means a lot to me, because it's just like, it's so frustrating watching it and knowing as one individual, I'm not physically stopping, but I look to people like you. I'm like, oh shit, this starts with one person or 2 people in a group of people. What have you seen change, like, for a positive?
Well, there certainly has been a growing awareness, and people are far more educated. In 1972, we got a billboard in Vancouver, in Canada, and we put up a big sign that said ecology in big yellow letters. And then underneath in smaller letters said, look it up, get involved. Nobody even knew what the word meant at the time. And now we're seeing a lot of people, especially young people, who are getting involved and making a difference. Because of Diane Fossey, we still have mountain gorillas. Because of David Wingate, the Bermuda storm petrel did not go extinct. Look at one person can change the world. You just have to harness your passion to the virtues of courage and imagination. That's all it takes. And for example, back in 1981, I get a call from a guy in Glasgow in Scotland. He says, they're killing gray seals here up in the Orkney Islands. What are you going to do about it? I said, well, I don't know. I'm on the other side of the planet. My question is, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, what can I do? Well, anyway, we helped him put together a Sea Shepherd group. He went up to the Orkneys with a bunch of volunteers. They took it very enthusiastically. They walked up to the sealers and literally pulled the rifles out of their hands and threw the rifles into the ocean. Well, they all got arrested, and they had a big, nice public trial, and they got acquitted. And it turned out that we had so much publicity, we raised the money to buy that island. So that island is now a seal sanctuary.
Wow.
All because one guy says, what can I do? And so many people, all they have to understand is don't be deterred by criticism. Just use your skills, your abilities, and put it to work to make this a better planet. And it could be saving a species, saving an ecosystem, or even helping people in various, poor people, people who are refugees, whatever. There's so many things that people can get involved in. Just follow your passion, and that's all it takes to really make a difference.
Yeah, like getting people involved is so important. And to speak to that, when you founded the Sea Shepherd Foundation, how did you come about finding your first crew? Because I imagine it was like a tedious process. Did you just go out to the dock and be like, hey, you guys want to come? Oh, no.
I left Greenpeace, didn't have any money at all, but I wrote to all the different large organizations to see if I could get support. And the New York-based Fund for Animals, which was led by Cleveland Amory, said, well, yeah, could you help us to oppose the seal hunt in Canada, which he knew I was involved in. And he said, what do you need? I said, well, a ship. So he gave me the money, $120,000, and I went over and I found a ship in England. And now I had a ship, but I didn't have any money to operate it. So I went to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and got a grant of £60,000 from them. And so that funded the first campaign. I always find it somewhat funny that we are considered such a radical organization, but we actually got off the ground with the support of two very conservative organizations, the Fund for Animals and the RSPCA. And so that, and then we were on our own after that because we generated our own publicity and, we've gone through so many ships, and now we have 11 ships out on the ocean.
Wow. Yeah.
How many, you guys have lost a couple of ships over the years, right? You've had a couple of vessels that have been sunk. What happened with a couple of those situations?
Well, after ramming the pirate whaler, the Sierra, in 1979, my ship was impounded, I thought temporarily, by the Portuguese government. But then the judge on the case took a bribe from the whaling company and basically turned my ship over to the whalers without even a trial or a hearing. So I had no choice but to go in and sink my own ship in harbor to prevent them from getting it. And then we went back and sank the Sierra after it had $1 million worth of damage repairs. We sank it in Lisbon Harbor. So, but I thought it was a good trade-off. We lost a ship, they lost a ship. Yeah. But then I sold the movie rights to Warner Brothers for that and got enough money to buy the second ship, the Sea Shepherd 2.
It's a cycle. You know what you can sacrifice for the obviously for the positive outcome of the society, of the foundation, and you sort of take that, you sort of add it up. And it makes sense to do that.
I think one of the
ships are tools. Yeah. They're expendable. More important, if it's between saving the life of groups of whales or our ship, I will go with the whales any day.
Which is the mentality that you need and everyone involved should have.
Isn't that one of the questions you ask people before they volunteer? Are you willing to give up your life for a whale?
Are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? People say no, then we don't take them. And when people say, well, that's a little unreasonable, asking people to risk their life to protect a whale, I said, really? Why? In our society, we ask young people to not only risk their life, but to give their life for flags, real estate, and religion. I think it's a far more noble thing to risk your life to protect an endangered species or a threatened habitat.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think one thing I definitely noticed is, in the nonprofit world, there are people who are doing the work and don't always have the means or the resources or the knowledge to get, the word out there. You said you have a background in communications, right? So
Yes.
I've just noticed you've got a good business brain tied in with all of the amazing work that you do, because just right there where you were able to pivot the movie rights to then pay for the next ship, that's something that I wouldn't have even thought of. It's just such a brilliant way of kind of operating and just being able to, all right, here's this, let's do this. All right, we need money for this. You just seem to
Know the next step, always.
Yeah, you just seem to always have the next move figured out.
Well, the funny thing about they haven't yet made a movie. There's one in the works now, but there's always been in the one in the works for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So I've sold the rights to make a motion picture every single year since 1980.
Really?
Which means I've made more money on them not making a movie than I'll ever make if they make a movie. But so it's gone through many agencies, and it's difficult to make a kind of movie because it's controversial and whatever.
Yeah.
Right now, it's with Jacques Perrin, who made the movie Oceans, and he also made Microcosmos, and that he's a documentary filmmaker from France, and he wants to make a major motion picture with this, and I like the script. And hopefully it'll go. But I'm not holding my breath because it's gone through this so many times.
Yeah.
But when in media, films are powerful, but motion pictures, well, they're super powerful. So we, in that way, it's an excellent tool. We've been involved in dozens and dozens of documentary films: The Cove and Sharkwater, Watson film, Chasing the Thunder, and now Seaspiracy. And this is the best way in our culture to reach people is through films. People don't read books anymore. And I write a lot of books that nobody reads, but they do watch films. And also, the Seaspiracy is really successful because it got into a position of trending on Netflix. And so, the reality is, the medium is more important than the message. If you got the medium, you're going to get your message across a lot easier. And I think Seaspiracy is trending in the top 10 and in number 1 in many things for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was definitely up there.
The medium is the message. Who is that? McLuhan?
Marshall.
Yeah.
Well, I was fortunate when I was in university that Marshall McLuhan was a guest lecturer once.
Oh, really?
Wow.
He had a profound impact on me. He gave me an understanding of what the media is and how to get your message across. For example, the media, the news media, for instance, they're not interested in education. They're certainly not information. What they're interested in is theater and drama. And there's only 4 elements in media, and that's sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. If you don't have one of those elements, you don't have yourself a story. So you always have to work it in to get that side. An example, I led a campaign way back in 1984 to protect wolves in northern Canada. And I had the perfect story. It carried the headlines for 2 weeks because we had them threatening, they were shooting wolves, and they threatened to shoot us if we intervened, so the violence thing was there. Yeah. And we got an environment minister we caught taking a bribe from a big game hunting organization, so we had scandal. So I rounded that all up by recruiting Bo Derek as their spokesperson on that. And at the press conference, which was packed, one of the reporter for the Vancouver Sun said, "Come on now, Bo Derek doesn't know anything about wolves. This is ridiculous having her as your spokesperson." I said, I don't make the rules. I just play the game. You make the rules. If I had the best wolf biologist in the world here, Dr. Gordon Haver, Dr. David Meck, it'd be an empty room. But I see that 16 TV cameras here, and it's going to be the front page of your story tomorrow. You're going to write it. Your editor's going to make a headline out of it. You know what? It's not a damn thing you can do about it, is there?
It's true. It's
the way the world
system.
It's the way the world works now. And I know you've always said that the camera is one of your most important tools. And this was back also in the Greenpeace days where you were filming on actual film, your expeditions and your missions, and to show everyday people things that they otherwise would never come across. Yeah. Because you're either out in the middle of the sea, in the middle of the ice. Regular people would never get to experience these things. So,
Back then we had 8 minutes of film in the camera. So you had to change the film, you had to put it in a black bag, take it out, put a new film in. And then once you got that, then it would take about 2 weeks to get it to a news media.
Because he developed and distributed and copied.
A different process now.
Were you using 16 millimeter?
Yeah, 16 millimeter.
Wow.
Yeah, today, I mean, we can be down in Antarctica, something happens, and within an hour, it's all over the news media around the world.
Right.
I mean,
It's,
that was an impossibility back then.
to me now that everything is so instantaneous, having that history, back then where you could show, sadly, seals being clubbed, films of those things, images that are necessary to drive the message home. Because like you said, like people don't read your books, but it's like very visual. It's a visual and jarring thing to
visceral reaction
to cause an emotional response. And these films, The Cove, Seaspiracy, Watson, all like they do that very successfully.
Blackfish too.
Well, McLuhan actually said that. McLuhan says that there's cold media and hot media. The newspaper, books, that's cold media, and television, movies, those hot media. And when you put a hot message on a hot media, it's emotionally enthralling. Like Vietnam was the first war on visually, so it actually brought a war into the living rooms of everybody, and everybody got emotionally involved, and that's why it developed such an incredible anti-war message during that time. Have you noticed ever since then the Pentagon does not allow that to happen anymore? You don't see that the way it was. So people are no longer emotionally involved in those kind of stories, and they made it, that was a concerted effort on the part of the Pentagon to make sure that didn't happen again.
Yeah, I'm sure that you've dealt with your fair share of threats and things like that from, the whaling industry, just the fishing industry overall, in terms of like the things that you guys exposed. Like back then, I think now it's, again, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like now it's easier to document and spread the word versus back then. Like you're saying, you had only 8 minutes of footage and people knew, if they destroyed the camera, that's it. Whereas now you could take a video and that could be uploaded live to Facebook and that's global. What was it like back then trying to spread the news versus now?
Well, it is easier now, but it was actually more of a powerful impact back then because, we only had 3 networks in the United States, 3 networks in the United Kingdom. So when you got onto one of those networks, you reached a lot of people. So now it's so multi-diverse, it's everywhere. Yeah. And now people get to choose their media. So the right-wingers watch the right-wing media, the left-wingers watch the left-wing media and everything. Back then, you had people like Walter Cronkite. He didn't have a right or a left position. He was there to deliver the news. Yeah. And you got an unbiased, objective story. You don't have that kind of thing anymore. So it's more difficult in that respect.
Yeah, like you said now, that how important, like now, that Seaspiracy was trending on Netflix. They open up Netflix, they see either the Seaspiracy trailer or cover. It's like, oh my God, this must be good. But it's driving a very powerful message home. So just the fact that it's trending doesn't mean like, oh, this is for your entertainment. Like anything can trend if you give it the right attention, which is great.
I definitely felt ignorant to some of it. Yeah.
And people have to understand how to do that. I got a couple of messages from people who says, I made this film about what was going on, and it was factually correct and scientifically sound, and nobody watched it. I said, yeah, because nobody's interested in your dissertation for your PhD, really. Right. What they're interested in is a story. Yeah. Seaspiracy is Ali and Lucy Tabrizi's story. Sharkwater was Rob Stewart's story. Gorillas in the Mist was Diane Fossey's story. So this is what appeals to people, those kind of stories. This is why Sylvie Earle's Mission Blue and all of these things, it's a story. And again, it's the medium and the message, and you have to make sure that they complement each other. I've always said, though, that the camera is the most powerful weapon that's ever been invented. And look what I think the Academy Award should go to that 15-year-old girl who documented the George Floyd killing.
Oh my God. Yeah.
She stood there, she took it and everything. What a powerful piece of footage that was. And
what courage that took.
Yeah, that's video that changes the world.
Yeah.
Exactly. Speaking of that kind of courage, obviously you've had your fair share of, I would say, scary moments in my life. I don't know if you would describe them as such, but have you had any moments that stood out where you truly, truly were concerned for your actual well-being?
Well, I've had a lot of moments where there was a possibility I would die, I guess, but I wasn't really overly concerned about it. I mean, you're going to die someday, aren't you? So it doesn't really matter when. Everybody dies, but does everybody live? That's the thing. I don't really worry too much about the future. I learned a very important lesson way back in 1973. I volunteered to be a medic for the American Indian movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota, and we were protesting the failure of the U.S. government to recognize the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. And we were surrounded by 3,000 federal agents. They were firing into the village. They killed 2, wounded 46, and I went to Russell Means, who was the leader of the American Indian movement, and I said, we don't have any hope of winning, or the odds against us are overwhelming. And so why don't we just give up? And he looked at me and says, well, we're not concerned about the odds against us, and we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because this is the right thing to do, the right place to be, and the right time to do it. Don't worry about the future. Concentrate on the present. What you do in the present will define what the future will be. And so this is how we do this with Sea Shepherd. We're not going to fret or be depressed about the future. We're going to do everything we can in the present to define what that future will be.
It definitely sounds like I could probably take a page or two from your book when it comes to your perspective on things, because I think that whole being present aspect is incredibly important.
We live in a world where we're worrying about what's going to happen in a week. Where am I going to be in a couple of weeks? And there's stuff happening right under our feet where we just let it go. Like we're not paying much attention.
That old saying, live every day like it's going to be your last, because it could be.
Yeah. You never know.
You definitely embody that. All right. So I got a couple of quick questions. So in 1975, you were, I think, near Siberian Russia, and you were dealing with some Russian whaling boats. I think it was a group of 8 sperm whales you were trying to protect.
That was in the North Pacific, not in Siberia.
Okay.
In the North Pacific. And I was with Greenpeace at the time, and we had come up with this idea to save the whales. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, so all we had to do was put our bodies between the harpoons and the whales, and that would save them. And so in June of 75, Robert Hunter and I were in a small inflatable boat in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel. It was bearing down on 8 sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to take aim, I would block it with the boat, and that worked for about 20 minutes until the captain came running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner, then looked down on us, smiled, and brought his finger across his neck like this, and said, and that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, there was this sort of incredible explosion, this roar, this thing flew over our head, this 250-pound explosive harpoon slammed into the backside of a female in the pod of 8, and she screamed. I didn't even know whales could do that. And she rolled on her side, blood everywhere, and suddenly the largest whale in that pod rose up, slammed the water with his tail, and dove and swam right underneath of us and threw himself straight at the bow of that harpoon vessel. But they were waiting with an unattached harpoon. They knew he would do that to defend the pod. And the harpooner pulled the trigger and hit the whale in the head point blank. The whale fell back, rolling in agony on the surface, and as he did, I caught his eye, and he looked straight at me, and then he dove, and I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight at our little boat, and he came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move was to fall right down on top of us to crush us. And as his head rose out of the water, and I looked into this eye, an eye the size of my fist, so close I could see my own reflection in that eye, I saw something that changed my life forever, and that was understanding. That whale understood what we were trying to do. And I could see the effort he made to pull himself back, and his head began to descend into the sea, and his eye went below the surface, and he died. Could have killed us, chose not to do so. But I also saw something else in that eye, felt something else, and it was pity. Not for himself, but for us. That we could take life so thoughtlessly, so heartlessly, so mercilessly, and what for? Why were the Russians killing those whales? They didn't eat them. Sperm whale and spermaceti oil were used for high heat-resistant lubricating oil for machinery, and one of the prized uses for it was in the construction and running of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are killing this incredibly intelligent, socially complex, beautiful, sentient, self-aware sentient being for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it occurred to me, we're insane. We're certainly ecologically insane. And I said, from that moment on, I do what I do for them. not for us, but for them. So 10 years later, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet, destroyed their whale processing plant, and shut down their operations for 17 years. And I had a colleague from Greenpeace come up to me and he said, I just want to let you know that what you did in Iceland was reprehensible, inexcusable, and you're an embarrassment to this movement. And I said, so? And he said, aren't you concerned with what people think of you? I said, no, John, not at all. Didn't sink those whaling ships for you or Greenpeace or anybody else. Sunk them for the whales. Find me a whale that disagreed with what we did that day, and I promise you, we won't do it again.
Wow. Yeah, that's.
I think that would solidify it for most people. Was that like the beginning? Because you were still with Greenpeace at the time, right? This is a little bit before you moved on to.
That was in 75.
Yeah.
I left Greenpeace in 77.
Oh, did you leave Greenpeace after the sealing vessel incident situation?
On the second SEAL campaign, not after the first one.
Okay.
On the second SEAL campaign, what happened there is that I was actually handcuffed to a winch line and dragged across the ice and through the water and the ice and brought up and dragged through a gauntlet of sealers and who were kicking and spitting and that. And it took me 3 or 4 days to recover from hypothermia. But just prior to that, I'd walked up to a sealer and literally I pulled a sealing club out of his hand and tossed it into the ocean. Now, there was a power struggle with Greenpeace at the time, and Patrick Moore wanted to become president of Sea Shepherd. I wasn't really interested, but he looked on me as a threat. And so he accused me of theft and destruction of property, i.e. the SEAL Club. And I said, well, if I had to do it all over again, I would do the same thing. I was there to save lives. I'm not gonna. I said, and he said, well, we can't condone violence. There's nothing violent about that. When you save the life of an animal by destroying a non-sentient object, that is not an act of violence.
Yeah.
But anyway, he held a vote, and they voted me off, which is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I have no regrets about that. Being voted off the board of Greenpeace. I actually wasn't thrown out of Greenpeace. I was voted off the board. Was the best thing. From then I said, look, I'll just go start my own organization. I still remember Patrick Moore said, yeah, well, you go do it. You ain't worth shit without Greenpeace. I said, okay, whatever.
That tells you all you need to know about sort of their approach, if we want to call it that, their approach at what they're doing. You always say that you enforce international law. You uphold international law. A lot of people would call you a terrorist, and they have. Governments have called you ecoterrorist. Can you speak more to your tactics, like how you go about skirting that?
Well, if I was a terrorist, I wouldn't be sitting here in Vermont talking to you about that. Anytime anybody asks me if I call me an eco-terrorist, I say, no, you're mistaken. I've never worked for Monsanto. So I'm not an
that's like the perfect answer.
But the thing is, we've never been convicted of a felony. And we've won every court case that we've had to go, a civil case and everything. But 12 years ago, I was invited by the FBI to give a lecture in Quantico and to the academy there, and I did. And after the lecture, one of the FBI special agents said, the Sea Shepherd's walking a pretty fine line when it comes to the law. And I said, really? Does it matter how fine the line is as long as you don't actually cross the line? We don't cross that line. We operate within the boundaries of the law and the boundaries of practicality. We operate in accordance with the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for non-government organizations and individuals to intervene to uphold international conservation law. And our target are poachers. And yes, we destroy equipment which is used for illegal purposes, but to me, that's an act of nonviolence. If a guy is about to shoot an elephant illegally, you walk up and pull the rifle out of his hand and break the rifle, that is an act of nonviolence. It's not an act of violence. So, but in a society that reveres property over life, then of course that's the way they're going to think of it. I think one of the best examples of this is a few years ago in Zimbabwe, a ranger shot and killed a poacher who was about to kill a black rhinoceros, and human rights groups around the world condemned this man for what he did. He said, "How dare you take a life of a human being to protect an animal?" His response was very profound. He said, if I was a police officer in Harare and a man ran out of Barclays Bank with a bag of money, and I shot him in the head in the street right in front of you, you call me a hero and pin a medal on me. How is it that a bag of paper is worth more than the future heritage of the nation of Zimbabwe? And I think that illustrates our priorities. We revere property over life.
Which makes a lot of sense because, the person that, does the poaching, they're not killing one animal. It's a career for them. They will do it for the rest of their lives. And having people not see that and the impact that that sort of poaching can have on the environment and the ecosystem and the country and the world and the future is just ignorant. If you can't see that, then to me that's ignorance and willing ignorance.
But I'll tell you where the violence is. And over the last 10 years, 1,500 people have been murdered for protecting the environment. Just last week, Rory Young was murdered in Burkina Faso in Africa. He was ambushed by poachers and killed. And he was one of the most anti-poaching rangers there. But we hear about cases like that, or when Diane Fossey was murdered and that. But about 250 people a year are murdered for protecting the environment. Nobody hears about it. It's not in the media. It's not going to, The problem with the media is, Donald Trump was going on about fake news. The problem is not fake news. The problem is no news.
Yeah.
Selective coverage or not coverage of an issue. So a lot of these issues are simply just ignored. And I think that's where the real failing of the mainstream media is. But it's understandable because the mainstream media is controlled by the very corporations who are the root of the problem.
Right. They're funding these missions and vessels and corporations. So
I could understand, I get the argument people make about not fishing the way they fish, but obviously local fisheries and things like that. Why on earth is anyone still whaling? Why is that even a thing that happens? I understand people who fish as an individual for food. That I think I get. But these mass groups going out in Japan, Japan and Norway, right, are still the number 1 and 2. Why are they still doing this? And why is the government still subsidizing this stuff?
Well, Norway's number 1, Japan's number 2 now, but there is no more whaling in international waters. All whaling is now restricted to the territorial waters in Norway, Denmark, and Japan. But it exists because of massive subsidies. It couldn't survive on its own. Whaling will die within the next decade because of the subsidies. So they just can't continue to do that. Commercial fishing also survives because of about $76 billion in subsidies that are given to it every year. In order to get the mass quantities of the fish that they take, they need super trawlers and gigantic drag nets and 100-mile long gill nets, 100-mile long long lines. And to get that, they have to get loans from the banks and they have to get subsidies. And you get a $100 million loan to build a ship. You better go out there and catch a hell of a lot of fish in order to pay back that loan plus interest. So it's the economics of extinction. And as species become diminished, their value goes up. And therefore, it's even further motivation to go out and get even more. Bluefin tuna has been depleted by 90%. And right now, Mitsubishi alone has enough bluefin tuna in their warehouses to provide the market for the next decade. Wow. So if they stop fishing today, they could still provide that market. So why don't they do it? Because if they don't and the fisheries start to recover, if bluefin populations recover, that's going to now cause the prices in the warehouses to go down because scarcity translates into value. So demand, and it's all supply and demand. So they want to keep those numbers down in order to keep the prices up. And it's a vicious circle, really.
Yeah, I still don't understand, though. Why are Japan and Norway and Denmark, why are they still subsidizing just the whaling?
Well, not just them. Every country's subsidizing their fishing industries, every single one of them.
Yeah.
Spain is one of the worst offenders, actually. The Spanish fleets are out there marauding like old pirates out there on the oceans. They're the ones that are stealing the fish from the Africans and from the Indians. And, we stopped the Spanish toothfish poachers that were down in the Southern Ocean in 2015. It was the longest pursuit of a poacher in history when we chased the poaching vessel Thunder 110 days from the coast of Antarctica to equatorial West Africa. Wow. They ended up sinking their own ship because they had no place to go without being arrested. Wow. And they sank their own ship to destroy the evidence, but we boarded the sinking ship after we rescued their crew. And we recovered the evidence, and the captain and officers went to prison for 3 years, and the company was fined 17 million euros. Wow. But these fishing, industrialized fishing and whaling, it couldn't exist without these subsidies. So it's really it's communism for the rich, is what I call it. Somebody asked me, I was doing a right-wing talk show one time, and the guy said, look, I'm a conservative. I'm more conservative than you because conservationists are the ultimate conservatives. And I said, why don't you quiz me on my conservative values? And he says, well, what's your position on women and gay people in the military? I said, absolutely opposed to it. I don't think women and gay people should be in the military, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't think men should be in the military. How is that equality?
There we go.
That's a perfect answer.
What's your position on welfare? I says, totally opposed to welfare. All these goddamn corporations, these corporate welfare bums with their hands out asking for money. General Motors, the fishing, they're all corporate welfare bums, really. So it's really how you look at it.
Yeah.
It's turning the perspective around, because all these corporations that are subsidized by even more massive corporations to go out and, like you said, deplete the oceans of what they see as a product, but they're actually depleting the oceans of vital individual species, vital organisms that are vital to us in our existence.
The planet overall will survive. We won't be here. A lot of species won't be here. It's been great watching. I'm blanking on the name of it. I think, was it called The Year That Changed the Earth? They just had on Apple TV or something like that, talking about
documentary. Just
how in the last year with COVID, how all the reduction in travel and the pollution reduction and parts of the world. It's only a year, but rewilding just a little bit. Some populations of animals having their best breeding seasons ever. Have you guys seen some recovery in terms of, you guys are out there on the ocean. Have you seen any major changes in terms of population or anything, or birthing patterns?
There's been a 10% reduction in commercial fishing, but there's been an increase in poaching, because that means that there's less enforcement out there for that. But when you brought up the COVID thing, it's interesting that diminishment of ecosystems and diminishment of species leads to the increase in zoonotic transmission of viruses. Add to that the melting of the permafrost and the release of microbes and pathogens from melting permafrost, and you've got a recipe for disaster. In 1995, Laurie Garrett wrote a book called The Coming Plague, which everybody ignored, and she predicted all of this. And we ignored it for the most part. We ignored hantavirus. We ignored Ebola. For a while, we ignored AIDS. There was West Nile virus, on and on and on. We didn't hear anything about it. And then suddenly we got a virus that kills white people.
Right.
Kills Europe.
Yeah.
And Americans. Now we're set up and take notice is something that we have to listen to. And the fact, but this is just a harbinger of more things to come. If you want to address this problem, then you have to protect the ecosystems and those species to prevent that zoonotic transmission, because there are literally hundreds of millions of viruses on the planet, and those viruses are associated with every single species of plant and animal. We have our own, the dandelion has its, whatever. Now, those viruses are very beneficial. We need them. Life does not exist on this planet without viruses. But the problem is when you diminish an ecosystem or diminish a species, the viruses associated with those species or systems has to go somewhere. Now, 8 billion of us, that's a pretty attractive bunch of meat on the hook, So we're going to attract those viruses which are closely related to us, whether they're from pigs or birds or bats or whatever. That's where we're going to get them. And but the virus doesn't want to kill the host. The virus needs to establish coexistence with the host. Yeah. Unfortunately, that process kills a lot of the hosts. So, but I think we're going to see more and more of these zoonotic transmissions of viruses, and they're going to be more virulent. And the only way that we can address this is through protection of our ecosystems and to prevent the diminishment of species. The three basic laws of ecology are: the first is the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity. The second is the law of interdependence, that all those species are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth and a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity from other species, that causes diminishment of both diversity and interdependence.
Exactly. It's like we said, it's an entirely well-oiled machine where you take one little aspect of it and you fuck it up.
Yeah.
Everything else just comes crushing down.
It's like, what did Einstein say? When the bees die, we have 5 years?
Something like that.
When
I mean, if the bees die, we're gone.
Well, the way I like to explain it is, if you look at the Earth as a spaceship, which is what it is, we're on this incredible trip around the Milky Way. And every spaceship has a life support system, and that life support system provides us the air we breathe, the food we eat, and regulates climate and temperature. That life support system is maintained by a crew of hard-working engineers. Not us, we humans, but we're passengers. We're having a great time amusing ourselves. But what we're doing is murdering crew members. the trees, the worms, the bees, the microbes. We're murdering them. There's only so many crew members you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart and the life support system collapses. And that's the situation we're in now.
It goes back to what you said, that we pay more attention, not we, but like as a species, the majority of humans pay more attention to profit and property than they do to life. And they don't see that, that sort of mentality is going to mess up the world permanently. It's going to completely wipe us out, cutting down the trees in the Amazon, overfishing, poaching, any sort of ecological attack, because it is an attack on ecosystems, it is an attack on the environment, is going to have a direct and lasting impact on us in a very short time, I think.
Well, what we need to do is take a good look at how we perceive the world. For the last 8,000 years, we've developed this thing called anthropocentrism, which is this idea that we're dominant, more important, and in charge of everything. Yeah. Our ancient ancestors were biocentric, as a lot of indigenous peoples are today. That means they understood that we're part of everything and everything's interconnected. So we have to restore biocentrism and learn to live in harmony with all of these other species. We're simply not going to make it. And all of our religions are all anthropocentric in description. Every one of them says that we're the center of everything. Every one of them thinks that we're made in the image of some god. Everyone thinks that we're all important. Right. But it's not, some species are far more important than we are. I was called up, Brett Hume, a reporter for Fox News, called me up a few years ago. He says, I heard that you said that worms and trees and bees and fish are more important than people. I said, yeah. I said that. And he said, how can you say something so outrageous like that? I said, well, because for a simple reason, that birds and trees and worms and fish are more important than people. And I can tell you why, because they can exist here without us, but we can't exist without them. We need them. They don't need us. Ecologically, they're far more important than we are.
I think changing that mentality is, one, for some people impossible, and two, very necessary.
Yeah. Let's say
one of the funniest.
Go.
One of the funniest things that happened one time, I was speaking at the University of Texas, and this guy stood up and he said, I think we don't need all these other species. We can live here. We got machinery. We know how. We have computers. We don't need any other species to survive. I said, and I looked at him. Okay, I'm looking at you. What do I see? Do I see an individual? He says, yes, I'm an individual. I said, no, you're not. You're a symbiont. You're a collection of about 1,700 different species of microbes that are living in your body, of which, if you didn't have them, you couldn't live. They're absolutely essential for your survival. We're not individuals. We're communities of living things. And everything is interconnected with that. So everything affects everything else. So it's both within us and it's outside of us. And also, I think we have to understand, what is the ocean? First of all, the planet is the ocean. We call it the Earth, but it's the ocean. It's water in continuous circulation, constantly moving. Sometimes it's in the ice, sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes it's underground, sometimes it's in the clouds, and sometimes it's in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet, constantly moving through all of those mediums. We are the ocean. The water in your body was once in ice, once underground, once in the sea, once in the clouds. And that's the way it is. We are one continuous part of this living planet, which is really water.
We are, I don't know how to, you're very eloquent in the way you put things, but I'm trying to get this thought out. We are insignificant to the survival of the Earth, but we're also the main reason why the Earth is dying. Without us, the Earth would thrive.
The planet.
But we are the main reason why everything is just...
To be fair, there's been 5 major extinction events prior to this one.
Right.
All of them caused by the same thing, which is overproduction of CO2. And what I've learned from studying those 5 major extinction events is that they all have one thing in common: 18 to 20 million years for a full recovery. So no matter what we do, 18 to 20 million years from now, it's going to be a really nice planet again.
Yeah.
Right, for some beautiful creatures to pop up again.
Something new.
Hopefully thrive, yeah.
without us. Well, if you could wave a wand, because obviously there's no way to get every single person on board, what's the one thing you would want to be able to change about the way humanity is operating?
Oh, that's simple. To remove this collective form of mass psychosis called anthropocentrism.
All right. I like that.
And to adopt the indigenous way of looking at things from a biocentric point of view.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that happening more and more. I mean, my fiance and I have talked about wanting to, actually from our first date, wanting to eventually have our own kind of, farm where we rescue. I'm big on like rescue stuff. So being able to rescue farm animals and have them kind of all living there and, growing our own stuff and being able to kind of take care of things ourselves.
Contribute.
We're so disconnected from everything. Like, if I got sushi for dinner, I press a couple buttons on my phone, and then it shows up here. I have no idea where that fish came from. I have no idea what that process was like. We are so disconnected from our food sources in a way that it's. I feel like it's easy for people to disconnect from the cruelty and just the absolute terror that is rained down upon our oceans and the forests and all these places where we're out just massacring just billions of animals every year.
It's out of sight, out of mind, and a world out of balance.
Yeah.
I mean, take a look at the fish that we take from the ocean. 40% of all of the fish caught from at sea from the fishing industry isn't eaten by people. It's eaten by animals like cows and chickens and pigs and domestic salmon and fur-bearing animals. And so we now live in a world where chickens are eating more fish than all the puffins and albatrosses put together. Cats are eating more fish, 2.8 million tons a year, more than all the seals in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's a world completely out of balance. We kill 65 billion animals a year are killed in slaughterhouses around the world. That's the single greatest contributor to groundwater pollution, single greatest contributor to dead zones in the ocean, and the single greatest contributor to the creation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, more so than the transportation industry. There simply is not enough room on this planet for 8 billion fish-eating, meat-eating primates. It's a world out of balance.
Where do you think this is heading? Do you think that we could recover, or do you think we're kind of you feel like the kind of person who is not ever going to give up the fight? But where do you think this is going?
Well, like I said, I focus on the present. I don't worry about the future. The future will take care of itself based on what we do in the present. But I don't know. It'll either go one of two ways. We'll either come to our senses and actually do something about it, or else nature's laws will kick in and do it for us. That won't be very pleasant for us as a species, but that's the only two ways it can go.
Much like everything, like you said, that we started paying attention to viruses when it started affecting white people. I feel like when it starts affecting the people at the top, oh my God, I'm suffocating because there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere, then we'll see a change.
I feel like we'll start seeing it when, your high-end properties in the Hamptons, Montauk, Miami, all these Malibu, all these coastal properties are going to start going underwater in the next, 20, 30, 40 years when we see the, sea levels rising.
If you take the 100 richest people in the world today, their assets alone could solve world poverty and could address climate change in a very significant way. But our political economic system is that people feel that they can hoard all of those riches for God knows what, and do whatever they want with it. It's almost like a game of who can die with the most gold. Again, I think the root cause of all these problems is human greed.
I think we can take that as the line to define just the worst of humanity. Greed.
Yeah, it's the opposite of Gordon Gekko. Greed is not good.
Yeah, greed is not good, and it affects us as a species from a biological standpoint. Greed is killing us. Period.
Yeah.
It's just got to be, and for you guys, it's being out there in the field has just got to be even more frustrating because I'd say you and I are pretty informed on this compared to like the average person. But I mean, just being out there and actively seeing the changes and seeing just, the way it's affecting these ecosystems, it's just got to be like, I mean, you're still committed to what you're doing. So I guess it's keeping the motivation there for sure. I have a sort of unrelated question. This is actually from my fiance. She absolutely loves whales and has gone her entire life without being able to see one. And she wanted me to ask you, where in the world, in terms of being able to do whale watching, would you recommend she can go see whales in the wild? Because we are not a fan of...
Where are you now?
So we're in New York, but I'm up
to
travel.
There's whale watching right out of Long Island in view of New York City. I've been out on whale watching trips there, and you can see the skyline in New York and still see whales.
Wow.
We had one actually
there was
in
one,
the harbor.
Yeah.
back, 3 or 4 months ago, and she was very hip. We were living in Brooklyn at the time, and she just can't seem to catch a break. She's been trying for like 15 years, so I'll let her know it might be just on her.
Yeah, you got to crack them.
I've gone out twice with that whale watching company because I give talks on their boats, and the one out of Long Island, and each time we saw the whales there.
So you just have to.
Which whale watching company?
I don't have the name of it, but I can find. But they're pretty easy to find. Any of those
Okay.
in that area.
Many in Long Island.
Yeah.
There was humpback whales were the ones that were there.
Ooh.
Oh my God, yeah, that would be an experience.
Yeah, whale watching trips out of Boston or out of Portland, Maine, or any of those communities along the coast.
We've tried in a few places, and we've had dolphins.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
Cape May in New Jersey is another good one.
We did it there too. Nothing.
You'll get
see any
there.
whales?
Nothing.
You went out.
We get dolphins. I feel so bad because she comes into it so hopeful every time, and then we get some dolphins. But like, oh, let's keep looking. But I told her, I'm like,
if you really want the experience, go to Tonga or the Azores, and you can dive with them.
Oh my God,
perfect.
That's a dream.
Yeah,
You saw the film, Watson.
Yeah.
The footage. Leslie Chilcote filmed those humpbacks in Tonga. She did that herself.
I was going to talk about that. The intro shot where I don't know what it's called when whales are vertical.
They're sleeping.
Yeah.
And that was filmed off the Azores.
That is
Isn't
an
that, like,
amazing
amazing?
shot. It's just swimming through them, and they're so majestic and gracious, and there's this sense of community because they're all together. It's just an amazing, amazing shot.
Well, they just found out in the last couple of weeks a breakthrough in studying the behavior of whales that sperm whales back in the 19th century were actually communicating the presence of whaling ships to each other, and were communicating that information underwater through sound, and warning each other of these whaling vessels coming in. So it was increasingly more difficult for the whalers to find them as the whales adapted to this new predator that was pursuing them.
That's very interesting. Yeah,
the
I was going to
communication
ask
component.
about how adaptive whales are in terms of whaling. That even the one you came across that you got to look right in the eye and see, just everything you needed to know.
They're more intelligent than we are.
Yeah.
And say, I was debating a whaler in Norway. He says, "Well, Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. This is a really stupid thing to say." And I said, well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with our natural environment. By that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are. He said, well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are. George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you.
You're getting it.
Yeah, how big is a sperm whale's brain relative to ours?
Sperm whale brain's the largest brain they've ever evolved. It's 9,000 cubic centimeters compared to our 1,700 cubic centimeters. Orcas are 6,000 cubic centimeters. But even more so is the convolutions on the neocortex area. The orcas and the sperm whales are far more pronounced, meaning there's more brain area. The problem is we measure intelligence by eye-to-hand coordination, the manipulation of tools. So if a blob of protoplasm steps out of a spaceship, well, there's no argument, it's intelligent. But non-manipulative intelligence seems to be beyond our understanding to comprehend. The intelligence of whales is you can see in their abilities to communicate, their abilities to adapt to their environment. And that's what true intelligence is. It's just the way we measure intelligence. If you ever taken Biology 101, they'll have a picture of a rat brain, a dog brain, a chimp brain, and a human brain. And they'll say, you can see by the increasing brain size and the increasing convolutions in the neocortex area that the chimp's more smarter than the dog, and humans are smarter than chimps. You know what? They never put an orca or sperm whale brain up there. It makes us look really stupid. And we don't like to look stupid, so we just simply ignore the fact that that's a reality.
Yeah.
We also got to think about that blue whales have been around for millions of years longer than we have. We've been, I guess, in our common human form, we've been around, 10,000, 8,000 years?
I think 20,000.
Well, the sperm whale brain 30 million years ago was the size of a human brain, and now it's evolved.
Oh, wow.
So the modern blue whale, what would you say, like 4-5 million years ago it evolved?
No, 46 million years ago.
Oh, so even further back.
It's had some time.
Wow, yeah, that's insane to think about, and how adaptive they've been, and now with the commercial whaling happening, it's just, to me, they are extremely, extremely intelligent.
They started off as land animals, okay, and then they went back into the sea.
They were like, we're out of here.
We haven't been around that long, really.
Yeah.
We're very relatively, and it's just a miracle that we even survived. We're the last surviving hominid species. Neanderthals went extinct. There's so many other hominid species that went extinct, and Neanderthals went extinct about 30,000 years ago. But when they say only humans are capable of art, well, Neanderthals weren't humans, but they were capable of art. They painted in the caves and that. They made tools and that. But what happened to them? Well, they came in contact with modern humans, Homo sapiens. So it went from Homo sapien to Homo sapiens sapiens, which is with knowledgeable apes. But I think we need to change our name now to Homo erogantus ignoramus, which is arrogant ignorance.
That'd be a more appropriate name, I think. Yeah, I saw, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about the evolution of humans in general. And like you said, Neanderthals weren't, quote-unquote, humans, because you have the Homo sapiens branching out. There is no evidence of territorial disputes between Neanderthals and hunter-gatherers. That evidence only came about when settlements started coming about. So defending your land and keeping your property, which goes back to the defending of property, which is very interesting.
And also a lot of the viruses that we have come from domesticated animals. Common cold, the coronavirus came from horses.
Right.
Flus came from pigs and birds and things like that. And we also did spread those viruses to hunter-gatherers.
Which is terrible. Humans are just horrible for the environment.
We keep we're the worst thing for the planet. Yeah. Apparently.
It's insane.
Yeah, well, we could turn it around. We just have to have the resolve to do it.
Starts here. Starts with educating people.
It's also persistence in that. I'm a great admirer of Greta Thunberg. I mean, a 16-year-old girl is going around lecturing leaders around the world, and they have to listen to her. And but she's mobilized millions of people. It just shows you what one person can do if you put your mind to it and you're not deterred by your adults.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that there is, the new generation coming up is inspired. I also think that there's an extra level of urgency of like, hey, we have to clean up your mess, and we're going to have to live in your mess. Yeah. So let's get it together, guys.
The problem with this generation, and, I sort of feel I have a 4-year-old son, so, I don't know what kind of future he's going to have, but I do know that my generation, I lived through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That was the most freest and most material wealthy time humans have ever experienced on this planet. It'll never happen again. The freedoms that we had then, we don't have now. And the resources that we had then, we simply don't have now. And it's going to be less and less. So the future is one of diminishment of both freedom and material wealth. So the generations today, young generations today, they're probably the first generation in a long time that really doesn't know what their future is going to be. They can't really grasp what kind of future that will be. What's the world like going to be 100 years from now? It's either going to be one of two things: some dystopian nightmare, or like Mad Max, or it's going to be like 1824, and we've returned to a world of sailboats and windmills and something like that. Because the finite resources, the law of finite resources dictates there's a limit to growth. We're not going to have fossil fuels, and there's a limit to what we can do with wind and thermal and everything else. And unfortunately, people think that we're going to solve all these problems through our incredible technological skills, but I think that's overall has made things pretty bad.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. Yeah. That is part of the problem. Just manufacturing, and the Industrial Revolution brought about more CO2 emissions.
It's also pushback from the big fossil fuel companies and stuff like that, because they, if we make the switch to renewable, we switch over to wind power, solar power, all that stuff, they lose their money. And
it goes back to governments lobbying huge corporations, like you said, with the whaling and the commercial fishing. It always goes back to the people up top. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. As Henry David Thoreau had said, the solution is simplify, simplify, simplify. You don't need to have these complex lives with all these material assets in order to be happy.
But we've been brainwashed into thinking we do.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Well, a lot to think about.
Yes.
A lot. We went all over the place, but I think we stayed into the true topic, which is, greed is killing the planet.
Yeah.
And it starts by getting informed and just, taking the next step, get involved.
Take action.
Yeah. So if you want to check out the great work that Sea Shepherd is doing, seashepherd.org.
Yes.
Can they sign up to volunteer on there? Are you currently looking for volunteers? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh, we're always looking for volunteers. There's about 250 people from 25 different countries on the ships right now. And if people don't want to be on the ships, they can be land supporters helping to support those ships at sea, or else they can just be contributing members and supporters that way. So there's many ways to get involved. Also, people can be part of our beach cleanups. We literally clean up hundreds of beaches around the world, local beaches as well as very remote beaches. For instance, we just took tons of garbage off Cocos Keeling Island in the Indian Ocean. We took 45 tons of garbage off of Cocos Island off of Costa Rica, and we cleaned up a very remote beach up in northern Australia. And people can participate that, and they can also participate in our anti-poaching campaigns on land, like protecting turtles on the island of Mayotte between Mozambique and Madagascar, or protecting turtles on the beaches in Nicaragua or Costa Rica and places like that.
So to anyone listening, if you want to get involved, it doesn't mean that you're going to end up on a ship. You can if you want to, but there's a lot more to be done. You can also donate right from the website, sign up for the newsletter. A lot of great information there.
Just educate yourself.
Yeah.
It's, at the end of the day, there's amazing people out there like Captain Paul doing incredible work, and
can we call you Admiral Paul now that you're just commanding this entire fleet?
Yeah, you've got a fleet now.
It's not a military, so I think the correct term would be Commodore, but Captain's
Commodore. I actually like that. There we go.
I like Commodore better, yeah.
Commodore Paul. But yeah, definitely go check them out. We're gonna put all of all of their socials in the show notes. Go on Netflix. Go watch Seaspiracy. Go check out the new documentary, Watson. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been. I've been freaking out a little bit just because I've looked up to you for a very long time, so I've been quietly fangirling over here. So thank you again so much for your time and your insight and just all the work that you do. Just thank you for your life and your life's work. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.